Welcome back to the Adonai Gameplay Animation Workshop. Today we're going to be looking over overlapping components, how we can use those to generate events that can be used with pre-existing code. So we can start, deactivate, hide, etc. Just basically anything and everything you want code to do. It could just be another event that triggers it, as well as line traces. So the first thing you want to do is understand what collision boxes are. So inside Unreal, everything and every character is going to have the details panel, and under the details panel, you're going to have something known as collisions. So there is a lot of things within collisions that you can select. First is generate hit events. This is for line traces, and then there is generate overlap events. This is for overlapping events. Okay, and then you have different collision presets. So you can have character mesh, you can have block all dynamic, overlap all dynamic, block all overlap all customs, no collisions. Basically, those presets are set for whatever you want your collision response to be over here, right? So there's something known as ignore, which means this will, it's just simply going to ignore that object altogether. So if you have world static and world dynamic turned on, then basically your character will fall through the floor because it's not interacting with the floor at all. If you have it on overlap, then it's still going to fall, but it's going to generate the overlap event. Whenever the player crosses through one of those things, it will generate that. And then finally, block. Block basically is a collision which makes it so your character can't pass through it. So this would be basically walls. So if you wanted to not be able to go through vehicles, destructibles, other player characters, etc. Okay, gonna just leave it on the character mesh blueprint. Right, so now that we've looked a little at collision, let's look at what we can do with collision. So here we have a cube mesh. This is basically a cube that has been dragged out from the place actors on the left hand side of the content browser. This is similar to the one that was already created. Uh, that's why the color is different. It's just using a different color material. Yeah. So anyway, within this, under this, you can also see that there is collisions. Let me find it. Collisions. Here you can set it so that if we have the collision preset set to block all, this means that our character won't be able to pass through this block. It can't pass through the block, right? And if I change this now to overlap all, that means even though the block still exists, our character can move past it. And it's not generating any events right now because we don't have it set to generate overlap events. As soon as I toggle this on, it's going to start generating events. You see on the top left side where it says sword touch something, that is basically a code setup in terms of component begin overlap that it generates something. So we're gonna look more into the component begin overlap in just a second. The other part we kind of looked at is line traces. So whenever you are attacking with your sword, right, you can obviously have it so if it passes through something, you can have the overlap event go through, right? But that's not always going to be necessary in terms of, or practical in terms of combat and how things are working. Because you can't have like the smallest of hitboxes just touch your sword and then you consider that it has taken damage. So the way we do things for it is we make a line trace. Basically, we mark the endpoints of the sword blade, right, like right here. And then basically every time our sword is moving or doing an animation, it's just calculating where those two points are creating a line. And then it's just generating hit events over there. So the way we have it set up is I basically have Let me turn on the visibility for this. Okay. And also the visibility for this sword bottom. So these are just static meshes that of cubes that I did. So I selected stone cutter and then I attached a cube to it, and then basically it moved it to my desired location. Yeah. And I've named them sword top and bottom. You could just use something like a static mesh. If you click static mesh, then it obviously doesn't have anything inside it, but it still holds the location, rotation, and scale values. So if you want to just have the point located somewhere without actually being able to see it, then you can use a static mesh, which is empty. You could also just, go to the static mesh of the cube and get rid of it. And let me just, yeah, as soon as I made it none, the static mesh disappears. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove these anyway. It's not like we're gonna need them. Okay, and we have these 2 points. So these are the top point and for sword top, and then the bottom point, which is sword bottom. And then I also have cube 1. This is like an extended reach line trace. I was trying to go for energy blade kind of ideal. So like if you wanted to do more damage, if the enemies are on the outer edge compared to the lower edge. So something like a giant battle axe. When our character is spinning, the outer edge would obviously do more damage compared to the inner handle. So you can have different line traces set up. And the way it is set up is like you just find the 2 points you want, you get the world location for them, and you plug it into the line trace for object function as a start and end, and it will start creating your line traces. And you need to just make sure the object types it's tracing for. So if you wanted to trace for world dynamics, for physics bodies, for vehicles, for destructible statics, world dynamics is usually going to be your primary one, because this is for objects that are placed inside the world. And sometimes it can also mean actors and non-player characters. Pawn basically is specifically for other characters. But yeah. And right now for debugging process, we have it set so that the draw debug is set for the duration and the draw time is 2 seconds. So basically after 2 seconds, the lines disappear. But that is only for testing purposes. So you see it's going to disappear after 2 seconds. That's only for testing purposes. But so this is the game trying to show us what it's looking at, even though when you're actually playing the game, you're never going to see that. I'm gonna remove this static mesh too. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go more into line traces later on once we start working with actual combat and stuff. But let's come back to on component begin overlap. So how do we get it on component begin overlap? Well, it's really simple. You just select the item you want, and as long as it has a collision set to generate overlap events, and it has a collision preset where it is blocking something or it's overlapping with something, then you can just right click it, add events, and then on component begin overlap or on component end overlap. Begin overlap basically means as soon as the object touches something, it will start it. And on end overlap is basically whenever the object stops touching something, that's when it will fire that event node. And you can also go to the details panel on the right side on the very bottom under events to select any of the events that you want. Okay, let me go close this one real quick. All right, so there's on begin overlap, on end overlap. So in order to experience and play with this, we went ahead and created something known as a buff area. And so let me just go ahead and create a brand new one. This time I'll make it a little fancier. I'm gonna pick an actor because actor is the most common blueprint that you can place. I'm gonna name this debuff area, right? And I'm just gonna place this blueprint right here. Okay. I'm gonna open this blueprint, and inside this blueprint, as you can see, there is nothing, right? Whereas in this blueprint we had a collision box. So let me go ahead and try to search for collision. So there are multiple collision boxes that we can get. There's box collision, capsule collision, sphere collision. Basically it refers to the area of effect of the particular object. So I'm gonna make this a little bigger. Let's go ahead and put it 20. No, 20 is a little big. Let's try 15. And I'm also going to add a particle system just so we can see where our area of effect is. Arrow, hail. There you go. So here our arrows are falling. Do I need them to be bigger? No. If I go on here, let's see. Yeah, that looks decent. Okay. All right. So now what I want to do is get rid of all this because I don't need this, but I still want to have something similar to the buff area, which is on component begin overlap and on component end overlap. So here's on component begin overlap of the sphere, not the particle system. And then I'm also going to do an on component end overlap. And I'm going to cast this to my player character, which is playable character Pratt. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side too. Control W. Okay. Oh, this is a dynamic cast node. Basically, instead of using get actor of class all the time, you could just use this if you want a particular reference to be passed from an event into get characters and whatnot. And here I can call in the custom events. So let me go ahead and create a custom event. Well, we already have a custom event right here, right? We have, I remember we made somewhere, yeah, take damage. So we do have a code for taking damage already. So let me go ahead and just duplicate this over. Control C, Control V, take damage, debuff. Okay. And I'm gonna create a custom event. I'm gonna name this debuff area. This is gonna go into take damage, and what I want to do is once our character is within it, he will continue to take damage until he gets out. And I think I want to do about, I don't know, maybe 2 damage is fine every second. Okay, so all right. So we're gonna add a little time code to it in a little bit, so we can keep playing it over and over again. But until then, let me go ahead and just see if this is going to work right now. So I'm gonna go debuff area. Right, we created a begin overlap, then it goes to a custom cast node, then it goes to a custom event, and the custom event is going on the blueprint and trying to do something. So right now, if I run under the area, then it will start giving us, it gave me 2 damage. It did damage, but like it's being weird about it because we haven't set it up so like it will constantly keep giving us damage as long as we're in the area. Okay. So let's go ahead and set up something for that instead. I'm just gonna take this code outside instead because I want it to work better. So let's go here. Let's paste our code here. Okay. So once debuff area has started, I just want to do oh, I'm gonna have to do a sequence, huh, don't I? Okay. So for this tutorial, I'm making things along as I go. So bear with me. Take damage over time. Okay, I'm gonna get this branch right here. I'm going to set this stop debuff, which means take damage over time. This is toggled off, and once this is in here, I'm going to set it once it goes here. Take damage over time turned on, and I guess I can just do something like this where I'll have to create a custom event again. Custom event, repeat damage after time. Okay. So this is going to go into a branch. That branch is going to have take damage over time. If that condition is set to true, then our character will go into the true and it will take 2 damage. And once it's true, then it's also going to do the repeat damage after time, right? And I wanted to do the repeat damage after 2 seconds. So let me do delay. Every 2 seconds it should take 2 more damage. And then it's just gonna go into this. Okay, so let me try to explain my code logic behind this. And let's also set up the debuff area to have the other parts. Stop debuff. Also going to do the do once. Sequence. Okay, so let's go over the do once node. What this does is it will only allow the execute node to pass once, like regardless of how many times the character crosses it, until the reset is done. So basically, the character is not gonna constantly keep calling the debuff area custom event, which will trigger this entire part until the character leaves and then comes back in again, right? So now we have this. Now we have all this set up, and this is going into debuff area. So debuff area, it toggles this on, take damage over time. Once damage over time is toggled on, it's going to go and reduce the player health by 2, and then it's going to go into repeat damage after time. So after 2 seconds, so this goes into this custom event. After 2 seconds, it checks the branch again. If the character has left the area, which would cause the stop debuff, then this take damage over time is turned off, so it will go into false. But if the player character goes back inside and the take damage over time turns on, after 2 seconds, the character will take another 2 damage. And then this basically is an infinite loop until the character dies. So I guess I also should have the end part for the death, which we had over here. So I'm gonna paste it here for right now. Eventually, I think we're just gonna have to make a small function or macro for death based on when the player dies. Okay. So if the health is less than 1, then basically the character will play the death animation. Okay, let's try this out. So if I go into the area, every 2 seconds I should take more damage. Yep. As you can see, it's slowly going down. My health is going from 100 to 92, now it's 90, 88. So every 2 seconds it's going down based on the fact that we are in this particular debuff area. As soon as I go out of it, our health stops taking that damage. If I go back inside, then it will start taking it again. If I go outside, then it stops again. Okay, so basically what we've done is we've expanded on the buff area, which was giving it more or less, into debuffs with do ones. The sequence part here, it allows you to have one execute node split into as many nodes as you want. Bear in mind that this is a sequence, so the computer doesn't run both processes at the same time. There's like a fraction of a millisecond difference between each node, but so it is in a sequence. That's why it is called a sequence. But for the most part and for all intents and purposes, you can just use this to split your execute node into multiples. Okay. Right. And then finally, what we looked at was debuffs. So right now we have this jump particle effect, which I was using as the stun. So let me add another particle system. This time I'm gonna call it damage over time. And we're gonna take heal over time 3D, I think. Okay. For some reason it has. Okay. Yeah. So obviously these arrows are green. I guess I could try to change them real quick. Yeah, let me duplicate this and I'm gonna write this as heal over time. Instead, I'm gonna do this. Damage over time. If I open this particle system, then it's exactly the same as this one, except I just want to change the colors of it. So instead of this being green, I'll just make it red. Right, and then the level up lines, I can also make those red. And the little sparkles, I can also make those red. I guess I also should change the direction for this. Or actually, instead of it going up and us changing it here, I could just flip it in the character itself. That way we don't have to mess that much with the particle system, because obviously the particle system is not something that we're actively trying to learn in this gameplay animation class. So let me go and do damage over time, and instead I'm gonna do rotation on z-axis and give it a 180 degrees. So basically our hearts are going downwards, and I'll make sure I also move the location a little up. That way at least It looks like our health is falling from the top. Okay. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and turn off the auto activate. This auto activate is what we were using early on to activate and deactivate the jump buff particle. So we can just attach this to the same system like here. So I am gonna do the activator here, and then I'm gonna do deactivate. So I can connect the deactivate. Let me just have it so it's connected to separate ones. Break node links. So the deactivate stays here, and the activate is gonna go after the true branch. So basically, whenever our character does take damage over time, this goes into true, this goes here. Let me move this a little forward. I know the code seems a little messy right now, and it probably is. Okay, let me also increase the speed of how much damage we take and how much. Let's do 8 damage at a time. And let's go. Okay, so we are taking damage, and that's why we have the debuff also popping on us. And then as soon as we hit less than 100, even though our health will go into negative, like we should still be playing the death animation. And yep, we start dying because it constantly keeps playing the animation. Okay, so that's a fix for another time once we actually start implementing player character death and everything. But this is basically a more advanced version of what we learned today by adding a particle system to the buff area / debuff area, and then just expanding on the previous kind. And that's all we learned for today.